Okay, so we are looking at some fun times as I get everything pulled back together here. We are looking at some fun times. We had a couple interesting weeks in Collegiate Overwatch. It's probably been like a month since I did one of these, but we are looking at power rankings, and probably the most interesting things that have happened is we just had the Kentucky LAN wrap up yesterday. That happened. We had a couple weeks before that the LAN over at Mizzou. We've of course seen NACE and NECC play continue. Those are probably the most relevant things. Will be these two tournaments. They did have low end top 20, mid end top 20 relevance in a lot of ways, and we definitely saw some interesting results. As we go to the Mizzou LAN, which happened first, going into this, you look at the teams that were involved and you go, hey, these three finishing top three, probably would have expected to see Mizzou somewhere in there. Honestly, probably would have expected to see Mizzou at the top of that. Instead, they went out to A&M Maroon. They first got knocked down by Briarcliff in a clean 3-0. And what we did see there is that for this LAN at least, we saw that Pella, their tank player, the tank player who's also playing for Avidity as their ball. They sometimes also use tools for other tanks, but when ball was sort of not hard meta, but ball really came into full steam in the middle of OWCS regular season play, we'll say, sort of the middle 2 weeks there, maybe a little bit in the first week as well. We saw ball was really popular and good, and Pella's, of course, one of the better ball players on the North American scene here, but Pella didn't play for Mizzou in this. So we saw that Mizzou had to scramble up their tank lineup and didn't get a top three finish at their own tournament in, a field that you would have expected them to be able to get a top three and really be a contender to win it all at. So that was certainly interesting. We did see Blinn did get the win here with a 4-1, which was it's listed as a 4-2 here. Oh, excuse me. It's a 4-2 here. They will probably think of that as a 4-win because they came up from lower bracket, which meant that Briarcliff started with a one map advantage in this tournament to the best of seven. I actually like that rule set. I don't think you can do it in best of fives, but I think on best of seven, since you're not going to do a bracket reset, giving the one map advantage is right. But then when you look at it in post, you go, okay, well, I'm not necessarily in post going to give them maps that they didn't actually play and win in terms of Briarcliff here. But Briarcliff did, of course, beat them in the previous upper bracket match 3-0. So we saw some ability to trade between these two teams. We saw Blinn ultimately got away with the win. For those that didn't see it directly, Mari did play. We did see Mari play in this match. We saw some swapping of tanks there. Most of us would probably consider Mari to be the best player on Briarcliff. And what we saw was that they did eventually at the end, for the last few maps there, switch to hard running Mari, and that wasn't enough to bring it back after they let Blinn get going, so different result than the previous match there. We'll be curious to see what that does for Briarcliff, because is that a case of they were just trying to build two different tanks because they want them to do different play styles? Is that a case of they believe Mari's going to have limited availability with Calling All Heroes and other conflicts? Is that a case of, the coach just trying to get the LAN reps for their other tank because they really believe that it's best to run these two tanks, or is it an availability? Regardless, we may see the team's faith a little bit dashed in the second tank as a result of this, though maybe not, because again, they ran Mari for the last few maps and weren't able to turn it around, so maybe the team is going to go, oh no, that's fine, whatever. This is on all of us. There's no scapegoating involved. We will see. Regardless, what makes this more interesting is here we see Blinn wins it, gets a championship in their LAN, and just a couple weeks later, this last weekend, we see, wait a second, if we follow Blinn's path, and we'll do blue for Blinn here, we see Blinn coming in with the 5 seed. Well, that's a little weird. They lost to Grandview, of all teams there, but we see Blinn going in with a win over Center and then a loss to Georgia Tech. Now, Georgia Tech's been relevant at this tournament before. We've seen them get top 4 finishes. Georgia Tech's a respectable team. I think now they're firmly in the top 20 here, and not in spot 20. But Blinn going out to Georgia Tech in a 2-0. That's a little bit weird. Okay, well, they'll just run through lower bracket. Oh no, they immediately go out to Converse Gold, who's probably another top 20 team there, but still, most people would have had Blinn in more the top 12 to 14 area, especially after winning this tournament. Now, at the very beginning of the season, some teams would have had questions about Blinn, some committee members, some teams, some players, some spectators, specifically because Blinn did lose their hit scan player, and their replacement is not a qualified GM player. That said, many of their players have been getting good reps on Masters teams. I want to say one on an OWCS team. Like, their players are seeing pretty good, meaningful reps outside of their play as Blinn. Maybe they're prioritizing that and not as focused, not as dialed in for like maybe winning as Blinn isn't quite as important for their players anymore. I don't know. Maybe it was just a bad week because we can see it was a bad week. It wasn't in qualifiers. It was in NACE that Grandview beat Blinn here. And then it was so after their Mizzou showing, they lost to Grandview, and Grandview wouldn't really have been on most people's radars. Grandview has pieces. You can see when Woods was there, he was recruiting, he was putting together a good team, and then he went away to work. He got, poached, whatever, went for the bag. Hey, good on him, whatever, to go get that, and clearly didn't quite fully finish recruiting a roster, so they sort of have like half of a team that you'd go, oh, I recognize players on. But they weren't really relevant last semester. I want to say they weren't too relevant this semester before that. And then if we go back one more still, then they were pretty good, etc. So this is a little bit surprising, followed by Blinn sort of falling off here. That said, it's a very short time frame. It's one bad week for Blinn, and that can just happen. That can be, a player broke up with a significant other. That can be, someone is just absolutely slammed or sick or not feeling well, or, a family member dies. Like, something could happen. I don't know that anything did happen, but that is something where, because it's all in a tight time frame, you're probably going to find that I am leaving Blinn as a little stickier than most people would expect, with losses to not only Georgia Tech, respectable, Converse Gold, respectable, but both below where people previously would have had Blinn, and Grandview, who maybe Grandview comes up a little bit, but that's going to be a big one. And this is not just the Bash Blinn hour. Again, Mizzou, this is an embarrassing finish for the roster that they have. Last semester, their roster didn't accomplish what we would have expected it to accomplish given its quality. Now, with Pella not playing, if that's a permanent thing, they probably just fall into a pack, and that's a big thing too. That said, with all of this negatives, also comes some positives. University of Texas, Dallas, they are not playing Petal. As far as I know, they have not played Petal all semester. I don't even think he's on any of their rosters in anything. And you can see University of Texas, Dallas went all the way through here, did get knocked down by Converse in the upper bracket finals, but then in the grand finals, they climbed back up after beating Georgia Tech, and they got the win there. So University of Texas, Dallas, win over Converse for the Kentucky Championship. That feels like something I could have said a few years ago and would have perfectly made sense, would have been a perfectly normal match, would have been like, yeah, this is right. Back then, it probably would have been teams in like 7 to 12 fighting for it. Now it's probably teams in about 13, 14 fighting it. So I guess that's not that big of a shift. Regardless, these are two old teams in some ways, names in terms of successful at Overwatch. Converse's roster is an old roster at this point. University of Texas Dallas is basically a completely remade roster compared to years ago, and this is a very good finish for them. They, of course, kind of got the upset win with the surprise pedal last semester that got them into ABC playoffs, and I know a lot of people, myself included, were kind of like, okay, we can't rate you based on for one game, for one important match, bringing back a player that you're not usually using. This we can absolutely call real. These are great wins. They did great in the qualifier for the Kentucky LAN. They won the Kentucky LAN totally deservedly, and in scrims, they've looked great as well from what I've seen. So they figured out a new way to play this team. I like it. I think they're firmly core back into Overwatch there. The other two teams I'm going to call out here would be, again, A&M got fourth place here, third place at the Mizzou LAN. Georgia Tech got third place here. Considering I know earlier this semester that team was really not having a good time, I'm thrilled to see the Georgia Tech guys doing well, back in it. Firing on all cylinders, even as the meta starts to move away from that ball specialty, which again, it had a 2 or 3 weeks of just being heavy on ball, and everyone was just convinced that that was great, as we saw in OWCS. Even as the meta's moved away from that and more towards Mauga. By the way, the Kentucky LAN was played with hero bands. As that's happened, they're still back in it. They're killing it. We like to see that. So let's jump over and look at the actual rankings. Hey, Blah. Hey, Hedwig. So, jumping to the actual rankings. So, this is what I've got. You guys know I don't try to make some big deal of hiding that. Let me adjust my face cam so that we can see that fully, which probably, yeah, we can just move that up a little bit. Okay. So, other big news that we've seen since the last time I've done one of these, at least, is Winthrop beat ISU. That is absolutely huge. I still have ISU ahead of Winthrop, and people are going to say, Temporal, what are you doing? That's not result based. Winthrop literally just beat ISU. I know. ISU is going to be sticky for me. You're going to find some teams are sticky for me. I think ISU has earned that stickiness in a big way, where they've just won, quadruple and triple crowns multiple semesters. I guess they didn't get triple last semester, but they have won enough championships in a row that I'm not immediately taking them down. I am leaving them in that one spot. I think it is fantastic to see Winthrop get a win over them, but we have seen Winthrop one other time get a win over them in ABC. We saw last semester Winthrop did beat them once, and then ISU came back and pretty firmly won the actual uppers. That said, there is a question of vulnerability here, specifically because the ISU players are very likely not as focused on winning as ISU. If we look back to last semester and the semester before, the ISU players were the ISU core was mostly focused on ISU. That doesn't mean you wouldn't see Admiral playing on another team. That doesn't mean you wouldn't see you wouldn't see like a Maimon playing on another team, or maybe Lethal sitting as a sub and maybe just taking over to win a championship. But what you were mostly looking at is you could tell that they put a lot of priority on winning as ISU. They really cared about that. I think now that we have very heavy focus, specifically what we're talking about is Nightmare, who did just win OWCS North America, spoilers, that you have Kuffa, Lethal, and Admiral all over there. I think what you're probably finding is this roster may not be as focused on winning as ISU, which means they're probably not getting quite as many reps as ISU compared to what they did last semester. And if you've looked at sort of roster quality on paper last semester, probably people would have said Winthrop's roster quality looked better than ISU, but ISU had roster quality that could handle that roster quality and had actual teamwork, actual care about the competition in a much better way than Winthrop did. I don't know if that's going to be true this semester, because I think ISU's players' focus may have drifted. And then, of course, we had the big announcement of ISU is effectively dropping their varsity program. So I believe their players, if they choose to stay, can get one more year of varsity scholarships. But this loss to Winthrop did happen right after it got announced, at least to the public, that ISU was basically axing their varsity esports stuff. So, that's got to be not news that feels great if you're an ISU player, because they were getting a pretty meaningful scholarship. And again, I understand they can continue to get that for one more year if they want, but you sort of understand that if any of your players leave, now you might be playing and getting good scholarship money, but you're playing on a team that can't hack it because you're not getting replacements at a championship caliber level for any players that do leave. So you end up in, okay, we have 3 world-class players and 2 diamonds on our team. Great, we can't win the championship with that. That's not what they have now, but that's sort of going through their heads. Their focus might be elsewhere on OWCS. So I think ISU is more vulnerable this semester than last semester. I also think, some of what ISU has learned, sort of understand, practice, etc., leaks right over to Winthrop because Winthrop, of course, has Zara and or not Zara. Winthrop no, yeah, it does. I'm not crazy. Yeah, Ultraviolet and Zero over there playing with three of the ISU people on their OWCS team, and that's going to mean the information leaks back and forth more, the strats leak back and forth more, which again leans more towards the team with more individual talent winning. Now, ISU has Lethal. Lethal is amazing. Can't knock that whatsoever. Okay, so that's why we're leaving ISU in this sticky spot. I'm saying why ISU is more vulnerable to losing than they previously have been. In previous semesters, I really would have been ISU's the champion. Winthrop is, even though I don't usually create the different tier, like the only team that really has a dark horse challenge of taking them. I think they have a very real chance of taking them this semester. I am still putting ISU on top, but I do think that the chance this semester is more real than it's been in a while. That said, I don't think Winthrop is hard focusing on playing on a team either, and yeah, we should be aware of that. Then the other match that was going to be super important that happened, perhaps even more important, perhaps the most exciting match that has happened all semester, and that we haven't talked about, happened over in Playfly. And you see how Northwood's down all the way down here in the core collegiate tier? And some of you are going to notice Utah, who is previously missed out on top 20. I think they've been better than people have given them credit for. I think they've been a perfectly reasonable pick for top 20, but I don't think, previously I wouldn't have said, oh my goodness, how could people possibly be rating them 22 instead of 18 or something like that. But they've been quietly good. They just haven't been playing against opponents in leagues that they can get wins that matter, And if you're not playing against the ASUs, the St. Clairs, the Cumberlands, you can't get your proving wins. Well, they found their proving win against Northwood in Playfly. They got the reverse sweep. One of their players may have had the best game of their life, but they got the reverse sweep against Northwood, and that's really relevant. Now, do we always have a little bit of an asterisk with Northwood of like, oh, Northwood doesn't take the first map seriously and you sort of have to prove it and then they come back? Yeah, maybe, but this was a best of five and Northwood couldn't turn it on to stop the reverse sweep there in a best of five. That is on Northwood completely and more on Northwood than it would be in a best of three in terms of its better proof for Utah. So even though Utah doesn't have sort of the second win that I really like to see to move people out of the pit or rear guard into the core, because the core is a little bit more, hey, you're resistant to teams below you. You can really handle them. You're not going to just lose because you're players are frankly just better than the lower teams and sort of the next tier down here. I'm pretty happy to do that with Utah this time because they probably should have been in the top 20 conversation more often than they were previously, and the Northwood win is good. Now, Northwood is historically has been the most trolly of the King teams in terms of, hey, they're the most likely to just say we don't care about a map or maybe even we don't care about a match against like ISU that they just don't think they can win in regular season. Yeah, they have been that team. And I'm sure they're thinking, hey, we'll just win back through in playoffs, so it doesn't matter that we dropped a match to Utah. But this is going to be something. Like this isn't something where Northwood looked like they were not trying or fooling around or trying to off roll. No, like Utah managed to do the reverse sweep, which means they had to win three maps in a row. And after you win that first map, Northwood to some degree is really trying. And with, Northwood's roster quality, that has to be respected. But no, Utah is not going ahead of Northwood for just that one win. Sorry, Utah guys, that's not happening. You're firmly in my collegiate core here, at least the lower portion of it, though, with only one win. And I think that is sort of the appropriate movement for beating the funny entity that is Northwood. Hey Cartier, hey Twin Salty. It's Boathaven, Hedwig. And it matters for Northwood that Rocket wasn't in there, don't get me wrong. But Boathaven, I mean, if I tell you, oh, hey, the Boat Haven DPS line lost to PDK, for example, you go, wait, what? That doesn't make any sense. And they did. So I don't care. Like, yes, it matters that Rocket isn't in. Absolutely. Rocket is a phenomenal player. Less so when Tracer isn't meta, but is absolutely a phenomenal player. But that's still a very good win because the backup behind Rocket is still a competent player that if you asked any committee member would have said, every committee member, if you're serious, would have said that Northwood's backup DPS is better than any player on Utah. That's, am I wrong? Anyway, so fantastic win for Utah there. Hey Zay, how's it going? PDK is playing extremely well in Face It Masters, to be fair. I don't disagree. But I would still say that was like the game of PDK's life. Now, it's been a minute since we scrimmed Utah. I scrimmed them a lot last season, last semester there, and, they've been improving. That looked like a lifetime performance to me, but, sort of once in a lifetime thing. But if that becomes the new normal, PDK is absolutely a force to be reckoned with. By the way, I am in the voice chat in Okra if any committee member wants to share their thoughts. Obviously, in chat is totally fine, but if anyone wants to be on stream in voice and sort of go over their thoughts and more, as usual, I am in the voice chat there. Probably, yeah, exactly. Okay, so that was probably the other most exciting match. So again, the teams that have sort of had the most interesting storylines are this Northwood Utah thing, this ISU Winthrop thing that we just had happen. We're then also looking at Briarcliff, Utah, or excuse me, UTD, Blinn, and I'll say Mizzou, though that's less interesting to me. These are some of the most interesting teams to talk about what sort of happened here. So I think we've sort of covered those. So that mostly does this. So now we'll just go through this relatively quick mode and we'll sort of go over this. Again, we've talked about this tier. This tier mostly just becomes what remains. Northwood falls down. Bryant Stratton is still up here. Fisher's still up here. Maryville hasn't really done anything yet. They're sitting here from roster quality. I'm waiting to see a match that matters from Maryville. They haven't done too much yet. I think they have a win over maybe St. Clair. I could double check. But regardless, Maryville's going to be either back of this tier or top of this core collegiate tier like Northwood is sitting now. That's just looks like the result I would expect based on what we've seen for a bit here. Okay. And then we're going to go ahead and jump down here. We've talked about why Northwood has come down. Again, I haven't seen too much interesting out of Irvine. This semester started with Irvine failing to make Masters and not even failing to make Masters by one round, failing to make Masters by 2 rounds. Not a good look for Irvine, but obviously they had the Romani injury there. That's, we're not happy about that. We love seeing our Romani Junker Queen. So yeah, that's continued there, but nothing has happened to really move them around here. St. Clair continuing on track. These two teams may be a little bit weaker than the rest of this tier, but honestly, I still think they belong in this tier rather than the next tier down. ASU, storied history, did, win their CEC quals, isn't really playing in anything else we can closely evaluate off of them off of, so we're not going to move them down. But, we're light on information. We're kind of light on information. We're light on meaningful matches, I would say, we're light on meaningful matches for all of this, I'd say. Fortunately, maybe not for this one because we had it, but we're light on information in some ways for all of this, even though we have some NACE, some NECC, in part because as we look here, we're going to see our super division, Maryville, St. Clair. There's our Maryville win over St. Clair. But, there we've got Saints. Here we've got Converse. This Saints would be not Maryville, not St. Clair, but Siena Heights. Here we've got ISU and Winthrop. So this is looking okay. Grandview sort of feels like they should be a tier down from the rest of these teams, but Blinn had an imploding week here, so they find the win. Maybe they're not. Regardless, this looks pretty okay. But then if we look at this semester's NECC, two Division I groups, they're not quite as powerful, I would say. There's just not quite as much in them. A lot of the Division 2 teams came up because some Division 1 teams didn't return sort of thing, and you can see okay, this is fine, but like Mizzou was in Division 1 over here and Mizzou didn't even get top 3 at the Mizzou land that just happened that doesn't have any top 10 teams at it. So like again, not to hate too much on Mizzou, but like and then we've got Rebel Gaming in here who Rebel Gaming always hang around, can be like a top 32 team, that's fine, but Rebel Gaming has never once been a top 20 team in the time that I've been watching Overwatch. Paying attention to Collegiate Overwatch, which at this point is longer than like anyone except Rich Rad and Kenobi. Anyway, okay, so we go through that. That's so this maybe not quite. We're just not getting quite as many matches in this tier in these two tiers really to iron things out. Then we get to this. This got a little bit more interesting because we did from here to like here get pretty good information these last couple weeks here with the mostly with the two lands that happened. And again, I don't think this is going to be too surprising. Cumberland is sitting here mostly off of last semester's results. There's nothing too interesting with them here, but they haven't messed it up. They haven't went and dropped two teams that they shouldn't, by and large. So here they are. They're sitting here. They were a little bit light on proof, but only a little bit light on proof last semester. So them staying in this core makes sense. Utah's here with their win over Northwood, as we talked about. Dallas did just win the land that they were at in Kentucky. Fantastic to them. However, they did drop in uppers to Converse's main team. So that is absolutely worth exploring. These two teams being next to each other should make sense. Most recent one, longer series one, was the UTD win. UTD is going to be ahead of them. Seems like a good place. But it's pretty messy. There is probably less distance. Once we get past this, there is probably less distance between these tiers than we've seen in a while. And what I mean by that is Converse in the qualifiers for Kentucky, they did pretty well, but they actually lost to Converse Gold. So Converse Gold beat Converse regular in the qualifiers for Kentucky. And then if we go back to Kentucky here, we go, okay, well, oh no, zooming in there is a mistake. If we go back to how did actual Kentucky do, like if Converse Gold beat Converse for the qualifiers, how did Converse Gold do? Well, Converse Gold takes an early loss to A&M, who got first place, so maybe not great for, they take a loss to the team that's going to get fourth place when, in, the last round of qualifiers or the last week of qualifiers, they beat Converse, who ultimately got second place. Maybe not great. But what do they do in lower bracket? Well, they beat Blinn, so that's a good win, except Blinn's imploding. Blinn, again, going through here, lost to Georgia Tech and Converse Gold to go out. And both of these are probably top 20 teams, but they're, lower end top 20 teams. And Blinn would have been expected, especially after having just won at Mizzou, to do meaningfully better than that. But hey, that happened. That's what we're looking at. And then Converse University Gold ultimately goes out to A&M. So we look at that. Converse University Gold loses to A&M twice. Maybe it's just a case of Converse University Gold has a bad matchup versus A&M. I don't know why they would have a particularly bad matchup versus A&M. We scrim both of those teams a lot, but hey. Regardless, I'm surprised to not see a map go Converse Gold's way in either of those, but hey, that's perfectly fine. Whatever the case may be there, it's just weird to see Converse Gold go down here after beating Converse the week before. And I know Converse's main team will tell us that they've beat Converse Gold more often than they lose to Converse Gold by a significant margin, but that did happen in the official. So that, is something we're aware of. That said, Converse has partially righted that ship by getting second when their gold team went out a few rounds earlier than second, we'll just say. So that's going to be a little bit interesting there, but we do see that's part of what I'm talking about in terms of there really can't be that much distance between the second half of this tier, and I don't have any problem including these two teams in this for it, and the middle of this tier. And I also don't think we have a great mix on CSULB. We just haven't seen great competition out of them. I think the last interesting match I saw was the 3-2 loss to Mizzou, but that was when Pella was playing, and I don't think Pella's playing anymore. We'll see. If Pella's playing, I'm happy to move CSULB back here, but I'm skeptical that that's happening. So this all gets pretty tight in here. What I'm getting at is we have pretty small gaps between the tiers here, in my opinion, other than this. And you might be going, okay, speaking of sticky teams, Temporal, what the heck is Blinn doing all the way up here, right next to Briarcliff, when they have a loss to Grandview, who's a full tier down from them? They have a loss to um, as we jump through here, they have the loss to Grandview. We can also see again at Kentucky the loss to Georgia Tech, the loss to Converse Gold. So like they have a loss to this team, this team, and this team, and they're up here. But they also beat Briarcliff. And again, it's a short time span, so I'm letting them be a little bit sticky. I really don't think that one player that's not at the quality of the rest of Blinn's roster should be having them down here. And you can say, well, Grandview should just be higher. That's fine. I can move Grandview up to here. I don't think that's earned, quite frankly, because I'm not giving that Blinn win full weight because I think Blinn's imploding that week. But even if it is, Blinn should not be performing this poorly with the roster that they have, and I'm really not going to hear otherwise. Like people can argue with me, but the roster quality that shouldn't be the problem. That and if people are going, oh, but they have one player who just can't hang, that's collegiate. Like that's collegiate. Again, we can talk of the legend of Rutgers, where they go, hey, we have two great players, two okay players, and one like absolute no name has been much of their history, and they still go make crazy finishes. And I know this level of collegiate has in some ways gotten higher, tightened up, that sort of thing. It's, like I know that has happened in some ways, so it's not the like, hey, one pro player carrying, two Masters players anymore. But like it's sort of never been that. Like we can go back to the original Harrisburg and Maryville days, and those teams were a bunch of contenders players. Like they were, even when those were the first two big teams in the scene. So it's never been that. And teams have still done better even when they have to carry one or two pieces that they don't like there. You think Fisher is worse than Maryville, though? You think you agree with the vast majority of my list, but you think Fisher is worse than Maryville. That's entirely possible. I don't have a strong preference on that, but obviously I've got them right next to each other. Let me do a quick look up on Fisher here because I feel like Fisher has something, but they may not. Do I have anything that's going to parse that? Oh, and I should go back and talk about Siena Heights because Siena Heights Blinn, that match matters too. Not really. Fisher 3-0ing Briarcliff. That's a couple weeks ago, but both of those teams, like either one of these teams should have 3-0'd Briarcliff. Yeah. And then as I look in here, do I have them in here? Fisher, what have we had in terms of played matches? A bunch of rescheduled matches. Went over Arcadia, we don't care about. The loss to Bryant Stratton, which we have Bryant Stratton ahead of them. The win over Briarcliff I just talked about, and the rest of these haven't happened yet. So we'll see. We'll see. I don't think that one's wild at all in terms of Fisher Maryville in either order here. I think based on roster quality, I would expect Maryville to be better, and I have hope that Maryville is more serious again this semester based on, some of their players playing more seriously in OWCS, though they didn't all get that deep in OWCS. So, like, on paper, yes, I'd say Maryville. Historically, Maryville has sometimes taken the spring as the actual championship much more seriously than the fall. So I think that's a good bet today. But I don't know. Maryville's just looked like they just don't care that much for a minute to me. And I was really hoping it would change this semester, and I'm not sure I've seen that evidence. That said, if we actually get an ABC announcement, that could change in a hurry. That could change in a hurry. I think 3 through 5 could be very debatable. Well, the only thing that would be locked in on 3 to 5 would be Bryant Stratton did beat Fisher there, right? And that's not even a hard lock in because obviously Winthrop just beat ISU, and I have ISU ahead of Winthrop. So there is some degree, and I think if I'm being serious, these teams, so like all of the teams up here except Bryant Stratton, maybe even including Irvine, are going to be more so than the rest of the scene in the hey, if it's not playoffs, if it's not the championship match, it doesn't matter that much to us because we know or we believe we're going to win all the other matches. We're going to make it to playoffs, and the actual match that matters is going to happen in playoffs. Like, there is some of that goes on with the teams that I have highlighted. And we could maybe especially say that for these two teams. But there is some of that I think goes on. It probably isn't true, or historically hasn't been true for ISU. So I would sort of go, okay, maybe the win there isn't too much. Plus, we're in a bit of a different meta than we were then. But metas always shift. Where's our ABC? That is an excellent question, Hedwig. That is an excellent question. I think they're more sloppy. I don't know my coach opinion from watching them. Yeah, no, I hear you. I hear you say. I mean, we all. That's ultimately what we're all going to do because yes, we watch the matches. Yes, we see the game results. Yes, we see whatever, but we all color it a little bit with okay, we have eyeballs. Okay, we know how a team's supposed to play. Okay, we can factor in how their players are playing elsewhere and go, that's gonna pay off if they're not distracted because they've now washed out of this event or they're doing well in this event and now the schedule allows, maybe ABC is actually gonna land in a way where our teams are able to focus on ABC because for the most part, they're not tied up in tier 1 or tier 2 play because it's on a break from tier 1 or tier 2, or, only the top two teams are worried because it's, while they're in China, or maybe it's while relegation matches are happening, so it only affects a couple teams that are more in like this tier sort of thing. We'll have to see what happens in terms of what it allows for players to focus, teams to focus on collegiate when we actually get our ABC playoffs. I did want to talk about Siena Heights versus Blinn. Blinn does have a win over Siena Heights, I believe. I believe what I've heard happened there is that match was played, but Blinn was pretty darn certain that Siena Heights was going to have to forfeit the match due to either like an account sharing or a player on the wrong account or a rename or something. And some people might go, oh, that's scummy. You're making another good team forfeit. Siena Heights has a little bit of a reputation. They do. So I can see that. Also, I think the collegiate sort of trust between teams and top teams and not making each other forfeit is further and further out the window at this point. Regardless, on paper, I understand Siena Heights won that. They won it close, but then Blinn went in, and this was before Blinn did this last week collapse thing. The results, as I understand them, do stand as Blinn has the forfeit win over Siena Heights. On paper, again, Siena won that, but if Blinn's players were sort of like, we know we're going to win this by default the whole time, you do wonder how dialed in, locked in were they to go, oh, we got to bring this back, we got to win this, etc. So it's hard not to look at that match however you want to look at it, as like, oh, well, Siena won it on paper and that's more important than the forfeit, or, hey, Blinn lost it, but then got the forfeit win, and the win shouldn't then get really hard to know what to do with that match. 3-2 Siena, Nace made them forfeit. Blinn had to wait an hour to play. Yeah, Blinn had to wait an hour to play because they were like trying to make a decision, so you're icing the players at that point. It's hard to just not give that match a giant asterisk in general. Regardless, I don't think it has too much impact right now because even if we go, hey, Blinn went over Siena Heights, completely real, completely whatever, Blinn's last week is just too rough for them to for them to be up in this tier. That's not happening. Many people would say Blinn should be back here or back down here, and I'm not doing that. I'm giving them more stickiness than that. I've exhausted that. I'll go back through comments and see if anyone wants to fight with me on that, because I'm happy to fight. I always am. But that's where that is. So then we move down into here. I don't think there's anything too crazy here. Briarcliff got second at their LAN. At the Mizzou LAN, yep, that makes sense. Blinn beat them, but then had a terrible week, and Briarcliff did also beat them in uppers before losing to Blinn at the previous LAN. Georgia Tech got third place at Kentucky. TAMU got fourth place at Kentucky and third place at the Mizzou LAN. Converse Gold beat Converse Regular, finished off Blinn. This seems like a pretty reasonable place for them. CSULB doesn't have any wins I hugely care about this semester, but finished last semester strong, looks good in scrims, belongs. They belong in this tier, at least the last time I ran into them a couple weeks ago. They did lose to Mizzou, but they lost to a Mizzou in a close match where Mizzou was fielding Pella. Mizzou did not field Pella at their own LAN. Scuttlebutt is that we might not be seeing much more Pella, so I'm going to leave them back here. Fisher Navy did beat Mizzou, and then Ball State did beat Northeastern. Grandview has their win over Blinn, hasn't done much else. They have their win over maybe at the beginning of Blinn collapsing, but they have their win in my mind over a collapsing Blinn, so I'm not raising them at this point. North Texas down here as well. And then the information starts to get pretty light. I know I've got these two in a different tier than the rear guards above them. I think that's probably right, because I do think, if you told me that Arcadia beat Grandview or Washington beat North Texas, I'd go, yeah, sure, whatever. If you told me Washington beat Converse Gold, I'd go, I'm not sure I believe that. But that's, kind of where we are. That said, I do think these gaps are very small between these tiers right now. That's where I think we are. I don't think we're going to see Fisher losing to UTD. I don't think we're going to see Northwood losing to Texas A&M. I don't think those things are necessarily happening. But if you tell me, hey, Northwood lost to Utah, well, that just happened. If you tell me Bryant Stratton lost to Irvine, or you get a Briarcliff win over Cumberland, or we just saw a Converse Gold win over Converse, all of those things are like, yep, that's how tight these are right now, even though I'm creating tier breaks. That's just where we are. And I think that's, fun. As long as we're still getting skill-based expression and it's not some terrible meta that is just like, okay, well, this is just letting the better players are regularly losing because it's getting too coin flippy. I don't think this is a case of it getting too coin flippy. Actually, even though we're seeing more Mauga now, by the way, again, the Kentucky LAN had hero bans. Most collegiate play does not have hero bans right now. We'll see what happens at ABC. The longer it gets delayed, the more likely hero bans get, but it has to actually happen for that to matter. What was I saying there? Hero bans. Before that, I was on a topic. Oh, I think we're tight. I think this is not as bad in my mind as last semester's meta, because I don't think Juno ult is as centralizing. I think the weaker Juno ult actually makes the comps, be they Mauga, be they Ram, be they Orisa, still a lot more, hey, the teams with the better Overwatch fundamentals, the teams with the better Overwatch players wins more and a little less coin flippy. That's not to say everything was totally coin flippy last semester. It's not, but we had a lot of teams that couldn't perform last semester, and I definitely think this is a better meta in terms of the teams are actually playing near each other as opposed to just, okay, well, this is just coin flip nonsense. But I'd be interested in other people's thoughts there. Okay. I know CCC hasn't done hero bans yet, but I could maybe see them doing it for the LAN. They could do it for the LAN, but I think it would be hard for them to justify swapping for the LAN when the qualifier didn't, unless ABC comes along and does them, which I do think it's probably slightly more than 50% at this point that ABC will do them if it happens this semester, and that would give CECC a reasonable green light to go. I think part of the other problem with CECC doing them is it's tried to position itself as nationals for all the other leagues. You know, a bunch of other leagues have bids to CECC LAN, and none, and I mean none of those leagues have had hero bans at this point. Like the Kentucky LAN is like, oh, have hero bans. That's cool. What else in Collegiate has hero bans? And I don't think the Kentucky LAN was wrong to do them. I think we're at the correct experimental stage for some stuff to have them, some stuff to not. But I think it would be a little tough for CCC to do that. I think it would be almost impossible if ABC doesn't do it first, and I think it's about a coin flip if ABC does do them first. Okay, so has Blinn had good showings this semester outside of the Mizzou LAN? Blinn did something that was okay outside of. Blinn started the semester just fine, if memory serves, because I remember going back and forth. I was higher on Blinn than Kyle was at the beginning of the semester, and then Kyle had to go, whoops, we're better than I thought. I remember that happening. Let me see what I can find. 3-1 win over A&M White. I remember them. I mean, maybe they didn't have it over in officials. I probably have to go back further. Let me see if I can find anything. I don't. My spreadsheet isn't quite as good as it's been in previous semesters. I'm slacking off because the committee's doing a better job of reporting stuff. And by spreadsheet, I mean notepad. But hey, let's see what I can get here. Because I thought they had something. The one over Briarcliff. Come on. Oh, they have a 3-1 win over Converse. And that mattered to me less prior because I think Converse has gone through varying levels of seriousness, but that is a win over Converse, and that's a win over Converse at the beginning of February. So at this point, it's a while ago, 5 weeks ago. But, you know, this is where Converse is sitting in this tier, and it's in a different time period, so it wasn't just some little hot streak. So that's two different spots that we're looking at there. Um, and that's probably all they have. Yeah. Okay. You're welcome to Insulty. Is there a reason that Grandview and North Texas are the cutoff for the pit? Uh, yeah. I mean, I could put Grandview and North Texas at the tail of rear guard. That makes very little difference to me, but I don't actually count Grandview's win over Blinn as worth that much. Um, sorry. And I don't think I've seen meaningful wins out of either of those teams. I'm going to be honest, those are two teams that I pay some degree of attention to because like hey, they have been good before just like I pay some degree of attention to UW, some degree of attention um this team this team felt much weaker than I would have expected from last semester. We went against them in CCC, and again, I remember beginning of CCC or beginning of in last semester in NECC qualifiers, activation, whatever you want to call it. I want to say they beat two Fisher teams, like 2 and 3 or something, and like or maybe they beat a Fisher team and an Irvine something, and it was like this is. And then I ran into them. We ran into them same roster in CCC, and it was like that was not real. Alvernia was more challenging than this sort of thing. So I don't know what's going on there. They're probably just not dialed in. You know, some of their players might have been hot streaking 6 months ago and now aren't, 4 months ago, whatever. Um, And so I think, there's some other teams in here that I'm not. We saw UCLA just got the win over IWU, but, in the past we've seen like IWU up here trading with ball back and forth right outside top 20, maybe getting a few top 20 votes if we go back like a year ago. I don't think I've seen any wins outside of the Blinn win that I'm not putting a lot of weight on out for these two teams. Yeah. Uh, yes. I mean, transparency on scrims. I don't huge. I mean, yeah, I don't. It doesn't hurt to give away our scrims. Have a fair amount of scrim insight into a little bit less you guys, a little bit less you guys. Fair amount there. What am I missing here? Uh, yeah. So vision into it is just what I would say. Um, yeah, I don't think I've seen wins there. If someone from North Texas or Grandview wants to yell at me, no, we have a win over TSULB, I'm gonna sort of look at you sideways and go, really? But hey, good on you. If I didn't check CSULB, pretend I checked CSULB. Um, yeah, so that's sort of what I would look at there and sort of how I come to that conclusion. This is what we're looking at. Again, lots of the teams down in here could absolutely be good again. Like I said, Grandview has half of a really relevant roster, and if the other players are getting the reps and play up to that level of the really relevant roster, they could easily be in here, fight their way up to here. Could happen. North Texas certainly has the players to do it. Hasn't from what I've seen, but certainly has the thing to do it. ISU, second team did some stuff last semester. Not going to take that away from them, but haven't seen anything this semester. Arcadia seemed to hot streak end of last semester, but hasn't done anything this semester. And that was the first time Arcadia had done anything. UW a year ago would have been more interesting than last semester or this semester. Talked about this. We had the UC stretch where all of the UC schools had their tournaments earlier this semester, and it was obviously Irvine that came out on top, UCSD that came out second. It looked like the UC teams were pretty close together, these four, or these three rather, and then IWU is here because UCLA just beat them, and that sort of, I'm using that to break them up, etc. Did I miss youth rankings? No. Well, I mean, you did. Yeah, I've got you guys here. I've got you guys firmly moved up to the lower core here with Cumberland, UTD, who just won Kentucky, and Converse, who got second at Kentucky. That's where I'm putting you guys. I've pulled Northwood down from this upper core tier to this core collegiate tier. You guys might be going, we want to be ahead of Northwood, and hey, I get it. It's your first good win. You guys were probably wrongly being ranked outside of the top 20 before. I think people putting you as an 18 before would have been reasonable. People putting you as a 22 before would have been reasonable. Now I think you guys are firmly up here and deserve to be up here. But Northwood also is Northwood. In terms of Northwood is one of the teams, and they absolutely played. They absolutely did not want to get reverse swept, but Northwood, a win over Northwood, fantastic. I usually require two wins for teams to actually make it into the core. This is really the first win that you guys have had over a core team. And I'm putting you here because, that's really impressive. That win over Northwood, even if they didn't have Rocket. But I do think, you guys had a player playing out of his mind who I'm not sure can repeat that performance, and you guys don't have two wins. And I know that's because the leagues you're playing in don't have the competition, but the leagues you're playing in don't have the competition, so it's hard for us to rank you. You don't have much other wins. Exactly. Exactly. Tamu up, let's go. Yeah, hey Fern. You guys did great. You guys did great. I know you guys are thinking, "Hey, we could have done a little bit better," but I think that was a good showing. I think it was a good showing for you, a good showing for Georgia Tech, an okay showing for Converse Gold there. Not a good showing for Blinn. Not a good showing for Blinn. Well, a good showing, I suppose, the week before for Blinn, but yeah. What is a play fly? Exactly, Kern, exactly. But hey, Northwood's in it, so it's got to be something. Super cheap compared to every other price competition. Well, there you go. That's a reason. Okay, I don't have too much more to go over here, so start bringing stuff up in chat if you want me to cover it. I think I've covered the two lands that happened that had a lot of relevance for bottom quarter, bottom third of top 20 and below. We went over sort of the most recent week of Nace. We went over that. I suppose I could go back one more week and go, okay, we see St. Clair over Converse. That's not terribly surprising. Grandview getting swept by Berryville. Winthrop over Siena. Yeah, that Saints got a map is actually impressive there. I very much expect that Winthrop was probably running, oh, I don't know, let me guess, Colluge instead of, what do you call it? But hey, whatever. And, there's just not a ton to be surprised about here other than this Grandview over Blinn win, which I've talked plenty about Blinn and Grandview at this point. Looking at this, I'm not seeing anything too crazy. Has Tamu White come back to reality in terms of this, silly? Wait, is this the right Tamu team? Let me remember. Um, it split you guys, right? Yeah. And White is the Doomfist team, and have they come back to reality? They had their little hot streak. I haven't put a second Tamu on my power rankings. Maybe that's wrong. Totally reasonable for people to have, but I feel like that one's going to come back to reality, and maybe has here, but ultimately we will see. I respect that people calling me out for not having Tamu White up in this mix of top, 15 to 30 is incorrect. Okay. For real, what about Tamu White? The problem is if I put Tamu White on here, the way they're playing is unique enough that they will get kills on teams below this line, especially below this line, but below this line and especially below this line because teams just don't know how to handle it, and then they'll lose to like an Iowa. I'm not kidding. And I'm not saying like, oh, Iowa is the team that actually has the exact counter, this, etc. But it's a team not having any scrims reps against it, being very uncomfortable. Like, wait, what do we do? And there not really being a way to get scrim reps up against it. But if you have the right skills mastered, you're going to beat it even if you're quality. And not hating on Iowa here, Iowa is not as good as Tamu's main team, and I want to see, say, Tamu White beat Tamu Maroon. In fact, I'm pretty sure that happened, but Iowa's not going to beat Tamu Maroon. And again, I'm using Iowa as the example. I'm not saying Iowa specifically has the skill set. I just recognize that it's very flawed. We'll say what they're doing there. Unfair hate from Tim Coral, perhaps, but that's fine. I mean, they do a couple more, and they're just gonna make me put them on here. Like that's always the answer. If you're unhappy with me, make me fix it, and you make me fix it by putting up more wins. And they could certainly do that. They could certainly do that. Okay, Blob. Blob's telling me to do the whole, hey guys, if you're enjoying it, make sure to drop a like and subscribe for more, which, hey, not a bad idea. But if you guys have comments, topics you want me to cover, get them in chat now. I'm going to start catching up on chat so we can see where we are. And then I'll catch up on chat. And if you get stuff in there now, you've got a chance so that I can cover it as I catch up on some of this other stuff. UNT Pit Warlords, hey Cartier. Yeah, you guys are Pit Warlords, but you're sitting at the top of that pit. Like I said, it really wouldn't be hard for me at all to move Grandview and North Texas up. I'm not feeling like it's correct right now, but it's not very incorrect. That's like a 55-45, 53-47 decision for me on whether these two teams should be up or down. And I'm saying, okay, 53% I feel like they should be down 47% chance. Feel they should be up. That's where I am. You guys could easily be up. Go beat someone, or tell me about who you did beat that I'm not aware of. I did the same thing with it being a 3-2. Given the news they got beforehand, I still think ISU are better, but the gap is definitely closer. Yep, that would be Twin Salty talking about the ISU Winthrop thing. Rocket hasn't been playing. Yeah. Okay. What do we got here? Hear the voice chat for your favorite Discord people who don't talk so they can talk even though they won't talk. Yeah, you got it. No, I've had committee members jump in here once or twice before, blah. I've had committee members do that. I don't know if I've ever had Twin Salty in here, but I've had Kurt jump in here before. I think I've had Kyle jump in here before. It's not common because I don't do a ton of notice on these things. I'm not setting this up like a podcast where I schedule it with committee members. At some point, someone should get a Okra regular podcast going where we regularly have 3 to 4 committee members or 3 committee members and a guest or something. Like at some point, someone should do that. Someone's not me. I'm sure, I'm sure if I volunteered, I'd get the job, but I don't want it. But I like being able to sort of do these impromptu, like, wait, I have time tonight, etc. So I'm not surprised that I don't get guests very often. They got wins over CNN and St. Clair. Uh, who got wins over CNN and St. Clair? Who got wins over CNN and St. Clair? I'm trying to. Oh, probably Maryville. That's probably timeline when that was. Yeah, Sienna claiming the name Saints as the third Saints team was really funny. Yeah, we could do without that. We could do without that. Can I argue with you? It's 100% the problem. Cope. Thank you, blah. Thank you. Who's Converse White? No, there is no Converse White. Converse Gold. Converse White and Purple team took the Rhine since they were both qualified. Ah, okay. That is an interesting little tidbit. If that's actually what happened, that's interesting. But I feel like you could also be trolling me because I've seen those Georgia Tech drama stir ups in Okra General before. So is that true or is that misinformation, Jen? The Blinn situation is very hard to react to for me too. Yeah, and again, I know I'm making some teams sticky that I expect people to not necessarily approve of. I'm making this stickier than maybe it should be. Maybe I'm making this stickier than it should be. I think this will probably get less hate. I expect the most resistance on me making Blinn a little sticky here. And by the way, Blinn has definitely fallen. In the past, I would have had Blinn in this core, in this lower core here. But obviously they were coming down with how bad this last week was for them. And I think that's the only really sticky one here. I think CSU will be as quietly a team people should be still be paying attention to, but the matches haven't happened. And not like, oh my goodness, they're actually up here or anything, but I think my having them here probably surprises some people, and I might be underestimating them a little bit. They might actually belong over like here-ish, but I'm putting them here because they don't have the matches. Yeah, yeah, okay. Even phase 2 was never ranked that low. It's odd seeing any use so close to the bottom. I mean, it's just how it is. Like Ball beat us in the official. I am perfectly I would like to pull more gears and make changes, but I can't really do recruiting at Northeastern. To get into Northeastern, you need crazy good grades and the university that I'm working for does not need me to use esports to drive admissions, which gives me very little recruiting power. Like that's just how it is. It's hard for me to get people into Northeastern, and that means it's developing the talent I have, which absolutely happy that, how most of my talent has developed, how my players play. But, when you're starting from a C rather than an A minus, you got to do more. And I'm not talking about their grades. Their grades were A's. That's how they got into Northeastern. But their Overwatch talent. I'm not generally able to get the former tier two players, former OWL players, because they can get money to go elsewhere, or if they just no lifed it in tier three super hard in high school, their grades aren't going to be good enough to get into Northeastern. We make them better, we do, but that's what we have to do. And the scene has gotten more competitive. That said, we make a few changes. We'll fight our way back into peer. Obviously, the when the Malga meta came around a year ago, we were really more up here-ish. But that takes a specific coach read of a meta. It just does. And it takes a meta where you can really coach diff pretty hard, like goats. But my players will find their success and find their solution. I don't expect us to stay here, but we're chugging along. We're chugging along. Hmm. We talked about, did Blinn have a good showing? Other than those two, Mizzou Land, UK, White Walls. Yeah. Okay. None of these teams ever play each other besides small bursts at LAN. Well, I mean, and some running into each other in NACE and NECC Supers. There was a little bit of that as well. But it takes like 7 weeks, 8 weeks, 11 weeks for those things to play out. Season 16 comp is supposed to have hero bans, though. If that's when CC playoffs are, I feel like that's also good reasoning. They could be. That could be good reasoning. I still think that's hard to justify if Blizzard doesn't almost give you the nod by doing ABC, because almost every league that like almost every single league that is giving a bid to CCC, including CCC's regional bids, did not have hero bans. And that's just like a little bit of a hard adjustment to make. And you say, oh, but a hero could get released between the bids and the playoffs and then be playable in the playoffs because it's been more than 2 weeks. Yeah, that's true. This feels like a bigger deal than that. Adding hero bans I feel like, has made a bigger difference to how much variety we see and how much teams have to prep and how much many comps teams have to practice in OWCS than adding a single hero to the game ever has. That's not to say adding a single hero hasn't totally changed the meta before. It, of course, has, but now teams regularly have to play 3 or 4 different comps, or they have to play 2 comps but be able to play 4 different adjustments of it, because okay, if Cass is banned we have to do this, if Sojourn is banned we have to do this, if Brig is banned we have to do this, if our tank is banned we have to do this sort of stuff. uh you finally made it to the pit. You guys should have been in the pit for a while there, current master. That's Vegas Rebel Gaming there. You guys should have been in the pit for a while. There's more teams that I could have in the pit. It's a little hard to track all of the pit because some of these teams will like make an effort one semester and then disappear the next. That's a thing that happens where it's like, did the Pizza Pirates do anything last semester? I don't think so, but they did the semester before that, and the semester before that, and then the semester before that they didn't. And it's like, is that because their players changed? I don't think so. I think it's just like, oh wait, how serious were they in a given semester? And again, I just talked about this with Maryland, where at the beginning of last semester they put on a strong showing, and whereas I felt like at CCC, I just looked at that and went, really? You guys beat, really? Even if the teams had had like no time to gel that you were going up against, how'd you beat them, sort of thing. Um, it happens. It happens. SCAD, another example. SCAD will just show up some semesters and like just not compete at all other semesters. Okay. I've learned UNLV is just a scrim team. We hard rolled Tamu after losing to them last week. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. But that takes practice too. Like, it takes practice to sort of recognize that the pressure is different in matches than it is in scrims, and the pressure is different at lands than it is in matches. And building those things up, figuring out how to solve for that is a thing too. I remember the first semester I started coaching Northeastern. Uh, I had a player who would just be pretty quiet in scrims. So we built our comm structure, did stuff, set it up, made a reliable comm structure. And then when match day came around, this player would just completely take over comms. And it's like, dude, I can't work with that. You can't swing from 10% comms to 100% comms on match day because it completely breaks the reliability. It completely breaks our practice. It's okay for you to go from 70, 80% to 100%. You can't go from 10% to 100%. Like, that's not going to work. We fixed it, but those are the sort of things you learn to adjust. Just like players will go, oh shoot, it's more stressful, or they're not in the comfort of their home setup, especially if they regularly play from home rather than a university computer lab type setup, game room type setup. Of It's not as comfortable, and that is a different setup and causes you to play a little bit differently. We're the Doom Kings, Tamu White. There you go, Cartier. I know. UST just bugging out for anyone else. Oh, I don't know if they're competing in anything. I pulled Bellevue, I pulled Illinois, I pulled Rutgers. Maybe I should pull UST. I don't actually know that SCAD is competing. Um, I think all of the rest of these are actually competing, but some of these down here might be competing. I don't know if Riverside actually makes the pit right now. Um, Ultraviolets may be competing, or whatever New York is calling their lead team, but I don't know if they're relevant. And by relevant, I mean even pit relevant. Yeah. Where would you put Tamu White if they were up there? Um, it's been a minute. It hasn't been like 5 weeks, but it's been like 2 weeks since 2 or 3 weeks since their hot streak. Eh, I mean, I guess I could put them like here-ish if I did it. I know they'll have beaten some of the teams ahead of them. I don't I don't care. That's not necessarily fair, I know, but I think as rematches happened, I wouldn't expect those results to stick. I really do think there's one and done power to that. And you'll have seen that before where like in previous semesters, where Riverside and Florida Orange, for example, UF Orange they would be crazy Roadhog teams, and Bellevue would even be a crazy Roadhog team, and you would even have like. Or like UF Orange would be a sim team or whatever. And those teams are annoying because you don't get practice reps against them unless you schedule scrims with them before you know they're your opponents. And I remember back, this was years ago, but I would intentionally schedule scrims with UF Orange, with either a Riverside or a Bellevue, specifically to get reps against Hog Team, Sim Team, whatever, just because I knew those teams could do upsets if you didn't get, a little bit of practice against them, even though it was super annoying. And also, nightmare rotation. It's the nightmare rotation thing for anyone that's competing in expert masters, whatever. It is exactly that. And Tamu White is Collegiate's nightmare rotation right now, where you go, okay, well, we have to make sure that we can solve this, but if we have to play you multiple times, it is going to get worse for you each time. And by we I mean any team in here, not us. We haven't played them. Okay, Warlord in a good way. We spent all last semester in the bottom of it. Oh, good, good, good. Okay, there you go, there you go. Yeah, you were pit warlords in a good way. Yeah, you've climbed, and I'm again. I could see you guys in the next thing up, but give me the win. Show me the win. Okay, I've had Lion and Paradox and Kurt. That sounds right. Was so sad when I had to play Circuit versus Dallas. I had not played that map since 2022. I know, and that's the collegiate thing. A lot of the collegiate leagues like to open up the entire map pool or not match the map pool to what the tier 3 scene is scrimming. And I know Osiris gets super annoyed about this when things don't match, and I get it too. I mean, we scrim with tier 3 teams too. We've actually are a little bit collegiate heavy with our scrims this semester, but usually we're a bit more tier 3 heavy. And it is annoying when your pools don't match, when you're constantly going, okay, let me find the overlap and we're going to over scrim the overlapping things. It's nice that they've tried to match them up more. On the other hand, Blizzard also, in the past, has somewhat tried to stagger the schedules so that they overlap but don't fully overlap, which then leaves you on awkward things like we had like last semester's ABC, where like 6 matches in, our map pool changed or something like that, and it was just like, well, that's kind of awkward. Like, oh well, it's gonna change a week from now, so we're giving you warning. That doesn't really help, sort of thing. But it's kind of a darned if you do, darned if you don't situation, because you either get stuck with map pools for really, really, really long times because you're trying not to change it while anything is going on, or you change it in the middle of stuff, which is pretty wacky, or you just accept that your collegiate pools or collegiate rules, in this case bans, are different than your non-collegiate bans your rules, which makes practicing outside of collegiate harder, which has been a problem. Is less of a problem now because I would say there is more collegiate scrimming that is sort of viable, but it does get harder as you go up. Again, as Blah was pointing out, Northeastern has certainly been higher up here in the past, and it was harder to scrim collegiate the higher up you are because there's less collegiate teams that are a good scrim. Quite frankly, it's easier to find scrims in here than it is up here, this sort of thing. This just sort of reality. Okay. Where was Kill Switch? He had to flight to take, flight day of. He didn't have any other options. Okay, so he had a test that he had to take or something he had to sit for. That sucks. So you guys didn't have Kill Switch, one of your tanks there, for your match on the final day, and that's a really good showing. Going, hey, we're gonna get. I mean, I guess most of these matches happened the day before, but you guys had to play against um, Texas A&M and UTD. You had to play against UTD without one of your tanks, and you guys do a tank rotation. That's not some like, oh, we just would like to have our second tank. Like, no, you guys do a tank rotation. All right, I'm out all the way to NEU. Trust. See you, Cartier. Peace. Georgia Tech did just 3-0 Tamia White 2, and we took the Doom Mirror map 3 for fun. Yes, you guys have your Doom player. Good for you guys. What happened to the scarf that bragged about getting bronze players to top 500? Top 500 isn't good enough to win in collegiate, blah. I'm not sure you realize, like, anyway. Um, yeah, yeah, you like, yeah. Bro really said I got 11 excuses on the field right now. What's up, Ajax? Hedwig, bro, the rest of our roster is top 3. What are we missing? Where's the beginning of this, Ajax? Where's the beginning of this conversation? Rutgers got the same situation. You all got 2 contenders players. Yeah, yeah. Okay, okay. Okay, you guys are both on the dean's list. Good, good. UNT beat UNT beat A&M White. Shout out to UNT. There we go. See, we're done with the A&M White streak. We're done with that. Maybe I move North Texas up over that, but what I really think I'm doing is I'm going, okay, Georgia Tech can handle A&M White, North Texas can handle A&M White. It's a little streaky Doomfist week or two. We're done with it, but good stuff. They had kill switch for A&M. Oh, they did have kill switch for A&M. Got it. Got it. So his flight was after. Good to know, Sweff. Had to be back for his job, and the next flight out would have been 6 a.m. the next day. 6 p.m. the next day. Got it. Got it. Okay. Okay. Good to know, Sweff. But regardless, I'm not seeing anything else. So I think that's it. If you guys have questions, comments, yelling about temporal, your rankings are terrible, yelling about Arcadia is actually the bestest ever and they should be in the upper core, uh, throw them in there. Throw fuel onto the fire. Otherwise, I'm going to wrap this up in about a minute. I I think just so hard for so many pit teams since there are only so many actual collegiate events other than ABC. I know, Kern Master, I know. But that's the thing. The pit is going to be messy. The rear guard is also very messy right now. I guess the rear guard somewhat sorted itself out. Blind's just throwing a mess into it, and to a lesser degree, we had A&M White throwing some havoc into it. But we got somewhat clear differentiation with the two lands that just happened for the rear guard. But the pit is always going to be messy because at that level, performance from day to day is going to vary more, and teams are going to be more vulnerable to they know how to handle strats A, B, and C, but they have no idea how to handle strats D and E. But some teams run strat D, some teams run strat B, some teams run strat A, whereas the higher teams more reliably handle a wider variety of strats and still can play roughly to their level. Thoughts on UCLA after CSULB LAN? Um, that's a good question. So, was there a specific CSULB LAN that just happened, or do you mean the one that happened earlier this semester that was like a bunch of the UC schools? Was there something more recent, Robert, like this last week or two, that was a specific CSULB LAN, or was the general UC event held at CSULB and that what you mean this year? I know there was a more general UC. There's a new one. Okay, got a link for it. I hope it'll let you link it. It might not let you link it, but if you throw it somewhere, I can get it. Can try and find. Okay. Because I would love something that CSU will be played in. Finals are this Saturday. Okay. Perfect, Ghost Dog. Perfect. Can you DM it to me? Because you'll have a link to it. And you also have my Discord. Or you could just link it to your teammate CSULB Frisco and he could link it to me. No, don't actually do that. Link it to me directly if you got it. Well, has play happened? You're saying that it's finals are this Saturday, but has play happened? Like, what's happened with my teams that are at it? It sounds like you guys will obviously be at it. It's your LAN. It sounds like UCLA is at it. That's perfect. Challenge bracket is perfect. You can DM it to me. I don't know if YouTube will let you send it through, but if you DM it to me, I will pull it open and we can talk about it with the stream. That would be lovely. Qualifiers to make LAN happened. Okay, and did we have any exciting matches? Do we have anything that like should massively change up my order here for these pit teams? Do we have attendees that only grand finals are played at LAN? That's fine. Who's in my grand finals? Tell me about it. I want to know. Uh, because I don't think this made our radar. And I think that's important. You know, that's part of why we added UC Irvine's assistant director to the Okra committee, because sometimes I think the West Coast does get a little less love than it should, a little less attention, a little less awareness. Like, we're aware of a Kentucky land, though the Kentucky land's gotten pretty big at this point. We're aware of the Mizzou land. We're aware of the Queen's Clash. You know, we become aware of some of these things, but I think there's just a little bit less awareness of some of the tournaments out west. Now, some of them just don't really have competition. Like, you're not really convincing me that the Cactus League has competition for ASU. But hey, UCLA is in after beating CSULB 3-0. Interesting. Interesting. Okay, so that's going to kill my CSULB ranking because I'm sorry. Very interesting. UCLA good. Okay. That's very interesting to me. Did you guys have roster changes? Robert, are you on UCLA? Like what are we looking at here? Okay, do I have a bracket here? Looks like it. Perfect. We have a bracket. Thank you. I appreciate it. So, looking at this bracket, CSULB takes down, I don't know what CPB is. California Pepperdine? No, I don't know what that could be. I live in California, so that's a Riverside team. That's UCLA. CSUDH. DH. What is CSUDH? I have not had to. Dominguez Hills. Okay. That even a university one? Okay. Cal Poly Panoma. Okay. Got it. Cal Poly Panoma. Um, you guys doing okay? Like, I don't feel like you guys should be getting pushed by BPP Black. I'm sorry, but like this is doing more damage to your rep than it is helping UCLA's if you guys are having to fend off Cal Poly Panoma, who I've never seen that school do anything in ABC. Like what? 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 Right. Like I think you guys didn't handle a meta shift or something. Sorry. UCLA has lost to Northwestern. Northwestern is nothing in collegiate. I mean, like, good on them. I know that, you know, they've had coaches and such who have tried to pay attention to other programs and figure out how to run it well. Like, from an admin standpoint, that's fine. But, like, that team is not top 40 material or has never been in the past. And like not only not top 40 material, like not top 64 material, maybe not top 100 material. And the fall off after top 64, the fall off after top 40 is pretty massive. Um that's why I don't think UCLA is anything to be excited about. Yeah, that's concerning me. I think you guys must be on the downtrodden because you were doing well at the end of last semester. When we scrimmed you last like a month ago, you were looking pretty good too. Um, but that concerns me. And UCLA, I mean UCLA's been fine before. If you told me, hey, UCLA's top 25 again, I'd go, yeah, that's totally reasonable. But I'm concerned here. So they beat UCSD, fine. They did this, and then we're looking here. Yeah, and then this CPP Gold immediately went to, or no, that's CPP Gold, CPP Black. How'd they do? Well, CPP Black at least made it back, but that's against Riverside, and that's a Riverside that doesn't have. Was Romani the player who left Riverside to go to Irvine? I don't remember. That was years ago at this point, but I think it was Romani. Riverside hasn't been relevant really since UCI poached their hog player. Um, and that was like 2 or 3 years ago at this point. Huh. Okay. I appreciate the input, Ghost Dog. I'm sorry to rain on the parade. I could totally be proven wrong, and UCLA could be like, no, we're on it. And I very much appreciate you sending over the bracket. One ob is UC Santa Cruz. Yeah, UC Santa Cruz has some talent. They just, again, have a little bit of weirdness and that some of their players are near one tricks and how the talent's distributed. Riverside is Hopper, Better Player, Cylinder, Silver Surfer, Watermelon Dog. Okay, okay. Got it, got it. I didn't know that. Okay. Underrated talents. Riverside? I mean, it could easily be a new generation of Riverside. There's always the possibility for a new generation, right? Like how a school used to do can be completely overturned by, hey, a new crop of people are attending it, and it doesn't matter what the legacy of the program is. Like, you got three good players, and you happen to have two other GM players, and boom, completely different team. Absolutely. And that's why Cal Poly Panoma could be great. UCLA could have had a fine enough core to be like top 25, top 32 before, and then gotten a new player or two that really pushes them over the edge. Like these are absolutely possible things. It's just not my expectation. It's just not my first instinct. Definitely a new generation for them. Underperformed in this bracket. Okay. But didn't we just have a UC thing that would have been another chance for them to perform? Like earlier this semester, we had a UC thing that, of course, Irvine won, but Riverside didn't like get second place in. I want to say UCLA and Santa Cruz and San Diego were the teams that were in play for second place. And if Riverside is really like, oh, we're this new talent, wouldn't they have shown up more at that? Feel Amalgamator also brings teams closer. I think there is some of that. Yes, I think anytime things get brawly and Malga's kind of brawly, it brings teams somewhat closer together because it becomes more teamwork oriented. I think this Malga meta is less that than last season's Orisa or Malga metas, but mostly because Satellite has been weakened and is therefore a little less controlling of the outcome of the match. But yeah. This upcoming ABC is the one where 64 teams make it, and there are 8 groups, at least prior semesters, right? Um, yeah. Historically, how it's worked is top 32. Historically, how it's actually worked this last year, I don't think that was true, but it was top 32, and then you get to double eliminations at top 8 in the fall for homecomings. And then for the Collegiate Championship, which is spring, it's top 64 gets to groups, and then out of groups, top 16 are immediately in a double elimination bracket. That's not what we did most recently. Most recently, we did a top 64 this last semester bracket that didn't become double elimination until top 16, which is, again, different than before. In the past, it was a top 32 in the fall that didn't become that only became double elimination at top 8. Okay. Rob is on Davis. So yeah, the Aggies over there. Never mind though. No, wait, you're wrong. Okay. Yeah, this is interesting. I want to see what's coming up out of California then. I want to see what's coming out of California. I also, if Gold is, struggling, I want to see them rebound because I think you guys have potential. If this isn't a case of Gold struggling and it's just, hey, we have new talent coming out of California, California should have talent. It's a huge state. It's a huge state that's, tech minded. It should have more than Irvine rounding out the top 20, which is all that's there now. No, CSULB for me was in the top 20 here. I'll have to think on that a little now with this. But yeah, I think that does it. If anyone else has anything, I guess this is the real final warning. Thank you, Ghost Dog, once again for sending over this bracket. Our school hates video games. They all do. I mean, they all sort of do. Getting a program varsity status was never easy. It's now harder than it was because, money is more expensive. Schools are contracting rather than expanding. Do not be surprised if some colleges that you recognize the name of go out of business over the next half decade. Schools are contracting a little bit, and esport programs may be a case of last in, first out because, in terms of spending. But we'll see. We're the best CSU school. Yes, you guys are the best CSU school. The other competitors out of California are UC schools. And again, UC Irvine, UC LA, Santa Cruz, San Diego, and you guys have been for a while. Like I remember running into you guys in like my first year in seeding brackets for like 9-1 or 8-2 teams because ABC used to be structured differently, where you would have that first semester or maybe second semester I was coaching Collegiate. They did their rounds of 10 Swiss. Their 10 rounds of Swiss. Then they did a seeding tournament for all the 9-1 teams, and they threw the 1-10. No, maybe they didn't throw the 10-0 team in there. They just gave them the 1 seed. Then they threw all the 8-2 teams into a bracket. Then they threw all the 7-3 teams into the bracket. And for the 9-1 and 8-2 teams that were in their brackets, they were playing for seeding for the then double elimination brackets. The 7-3 teams had like a 64 team single elimination bracket. The team to win it gets the 32 seed and everyone else is out. It was brutal that semester. For us, I think we ran into you in either the 8-2 or 9-1 seeding bracket that semester, and I think we then played you again in round 2 of the actual bracket. But hey. Um, was this when Collegiate was on Game Battles? Probably. Probably. I don't remember. I think so. I think it was still Game Battles era. Anyway, I think we're done. That's going to do it for now. CSULB, I agree, has been the best CSU, the best California State University as opposed to UC California School for a while. I'll have to do some final tinkering here, but this is my rankings for now. I know Okra rankings are due tomorrow night, so I expect by this weekend, those of you'll get to see what the new rankings look like, and they will of course get to include anything that has happened up until Tuesday night, really anything that has happened roughly through about today. You low-key remember that. See? Isn't it great? We're old heads. We've been around too long at this point, man. Anyway, that's going to do it. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks.